Hey guys, did you miss me? Because I missed you guys. Hey, welcome back, guys, to a long, updated, awaited episode of Bookshade, where every day is Halloween and when reading is Halloween as well. Of course, I am your host, Amira Blaze, here, guys, and where do I even begin? Because there has been such a hiatus, such inconsistency with Bookshade, and you guys are probably wondering what's going on. So I gotta explain that part, and then we're gonna get into what I like to call my Booktube detox, where I am, picking topics that pertain to the Booktube community and just detoxing myself of it and like talking about it and breaking it down. Okay, so we're gonna get into that in a moment here, but let's start from the beginning, guys, because let me tell you guys, it's been crazy. Okay, so first off, guys, I have had the worst cold and flu I have ever had in my life. And no, it was not COVID-19. So thank God for that. Okay. But this cold and the flu kind of hybrid that I had, it would not go away. Guys, I had to use like sinus spray for the last almost like a month before this thing would leave my system. And this is actually like one of the first day of me like getting over this. So I still am dealing with allergies and stuff that I already have, but this cold and this flu hybrid stuff that I had, it was really nasty, guys. So I'm not of course, as a disclaimer, I'm not a doctor or anything, but, please make sure, guys, if you are not feeling well, make sure you go to your doctor, go to a healthcare professional and, find out if the flu shot works right for you. I am so glad that I got mine. And then on top of that, guys, I also decided I'm very grateful. I was actually able to get the Pfizer COVID-19 vaccine. I got the first dosage, and then 21 days later, I have to, go again to get the second dosage, and hopefully that is it, right? I had that, guys, and then for the last 2 to 3 days, it is normal. The nurse that administered the shot for me said that you might feel tired and stuff. So guys, that's the first half of what delayed me, was that I was actually physically fucking sick. Okay, then on top of that, you guys may not know, but I am actually finishing up a master degree program, so that has been taking up a lot of my time. I'm actually working on writing the beginning of my thesis this week, and then on top of that, finishing up research for it too. And guys, it's a very long process to write a thesis. Like, I commend people who go on and do, I was considering also going for a doctoral degree as well. But a part of me is like, should I really go for it? Because if I can't even handle all of the research and the writing and stuff for a master's, I'm sure a doctorate is even more hell than what I'm currently going through right now. So that has been, guys. Let me hold on one second here, guys. Let me turn on my fan because I am sweating. I don't know why, but I am sweating. And it always happens when I'm doing a live, a live episode is like my hair will start to sweat, and then I start feeling itchy and all that. Terrible, but I digress. So those are the main reasons, guys. I also decided that I'm just gonna stick to the regular schedule that I had for Bookshade, which is on Tuesdays and Thursdays, which is twice a week. So I will be doing live like reading vlog reactions, as I call them, and much more we'll be doing. But mainly, guys, here on Bookshade, we talk about the, you know, of course, how I see the romance book genre. I read a lot of paranormal romance, interracial romance, and I love the daddy romances. Oh my gosh, guys, the age gap romances I just love. I love reading romances because with older men, like, I like men like that. Like, that's like, that's my thing. I can understand a little bit of the alpha thing, but you know, at first I was like, man, do I like alpha men like that? Not really. You know, it has to be done in a way where the guy is still being respectful of the woman, you know, or the partner. That's if you're reading. I also read LGBTQIA plus romance as well. So I do that. I also talk about like manhwas, which are South Korean like version of like manga, and I talk about all that kind of stuff, but I do it in more of a you know, paranormal romance and like more gothic-y type of way. I love the horror genre, guys. Like, that is my thing. So horror romance, gothic romance, all that stuff, you know, that's what we do here. Okay, now I'm also considering expanding into doing like besides books, I would love to expand just a little bit into doing like movie reviews based on book series, which I think that would be cool. But you guys let me know what you think about that. But let me drink some tea, because in the second half here we gonna talk. Okay, it's about to go down. So so let's talk here, guys, and it's time for my new segment here on Bookshade that I like to call, okay, Booktube Detox, okay? Or as I call it sometimes, Book Detox, where these are, you know, stuff pertaining either to the Booktube community or just books in general, where I'm just over it and I just need to talk about it, rant it, and say my piece on it, okay? And what we're gonna be talking about today, this has been long awaited. I have some concerns. I'm still new to Booktube, okay? So I haven't been around, you know, for a long time. But, you know, as someone who reads the romance genre, and I love romance Booktube with all my heart, okay? So I'm speaking, this is my opinion, okay? And I am just keeping it real. This is how I feel. So what we're going to be talking about is how I feel about the romance Booktube community. So the current state of how I feel about it. And there's a lot of things that I would like to address, okay? So the first thing I want to address in regards to how I have been seeing romance Booktube specifically in 2020, it was very interesting because 2020 for Booktube in general has been a complete re-evaluation of the multiculturalism, first off, in regards to how people like saw Booktube. Because let's just keep it real, when people think of Booktube, they don't think necessarily of people of color unless they're super popular, okay? Overall, Booktube is dominated, and that's okay. I have no issues with that. But mainly when people think of Booktube, they think of white people, because usually when it comes to reading and things like that, guys, it's often associated with white people, because the statistics, you know, from some of the stuff that I've been reading is that like white people, like, they read a lot, sometimes more than we do, on depending on the genre that you're reading and stuff like that. But one of the things that doesn't always get talked about in some of the research that I've been looking at is the reason why maybe certain genres of of different book, I would say or literary genres, they don't always get attention from people of color. And that is the lack of resources, guys. Okay. And I've learned this firsthand. Okay. Like, let's say, for example, and I'm using this in the context of like college, for example. Okay. Like when I started my undergrad, and I was interested, I've always been interested in reading. Like I love books with all my heart. Books really help me to expand my imagination and to really step out and learn about the world around me, and also even expanding into learning about cultures that are even different from my own. But what I notice is that when it comes to people of color, some of the environments that we grow up in, like our libraries are shit compared to the white people library, and I noticed the difference. Like when I would go to like a library that had a higher white, people population, it was easier to find certain books. The quality of books sometimes were better. Whereas for some of us as people of color, when you go to some of these more people of color, like libraries that are more dominated by people of color, they're not always the best quality, and good luck finding the resources, because sometimes the resources are not there. So before I even start with anything, we have to acknowledge that 2020 moving forward into 2021, there has been a reevaluation of how we treat multicultural booktubers and just people of color who do booktube in general, and also who like books in general. And it's been a really good thing, but there's been some pros with it and there has been some cons. The pro is that, yeah, we're finally starting to get recognized, and then we're also establishing, and this will take some time, to have better race relations with the white booktubers and booktubers of color. And I'm seeing that, because I'm seeing a lot more, like for example, I've seen a lot more lives being done with people of color and some white booktubers as well, and having these great symposiums talking about how to have better diversity in the community, and etc., etc. And that's the positive thing that has come out of it. But there has also been some negative, and let me explain this. So the negative is now it's like people are interested in people of color booktubers because they're people of color, and that's not why you should be interested in a booktuber who is a person of color, whether they happen to be African American, Asian, Latinx, etc. I think that you should like the booktubers that you like, because they like represent something that you're passionate about, or maybe you like their personality or whatever it may be. Just don't follow people of color booktubers because you feel bad that there has not been always the support for booktubers of color. You should do it because of the sincereness of your heart, The same thing can even be applied, like for example, in regards to, I would say even, let's say, even outside of books as well, if you see people of color that are your favorite, whether they're Twitch streamers or YouTubers, like follow them sincerely, not because they're people of color, because we can tell the difference between that. And we really want, and for me, it's like, I want to build a community of people who actually like coming to my show because they are maybe interested in my opinions, or we can have really interesting dialogue. And that is how, to kind of tie it back in here, that is how the booktube community is going to get better, is if we have transparent conversations and dialogue that is built on sincerity, and not because you have to check off something in a diversity checkbox kind of thing. It feels kind of artificial, and I'm grateful for the support. I noticed that I have over 50 followers, because I just started, over 50 followers on my Twitch. I greatly appreciate that. And then even on my YouTube as well, I have like almost 70 followers. I'm very, very grateful for anyone who wants to check it out. I appreciate that. My show is more designed for adults because, I'm an adult, and my mindset, that's just how I like to approach things. But yeah, please follow guys like, Twitch streamers of color or YouTubers of color, because you actually like what they do, not because they're people of color. Because if that's the case, it kind of feels hurtful in a way, because it's like, oh, well, you're only following me because I'm a person of color. It's the same thing could be said, like, for me, I follow a lot of white booktubers and white YouTubers and Twitch streamers, but it's not because they're white. I like what they present. I like their personality or whatever it may be. So that's something I wanted to kind of address before we get now into the romance booktube community and how I feel. So let's talk, right? So first off, guys, how do I feel about the current state of romance booktube? Let's go over the pros, and then we're gonna work our way to the cons, okay? So the pros, I have to say, like I said earlier with my more generalist point, is that I love seeing these diverse romance live, like, I love seeing those type of book discussions, because a lot of times when it comes to the romance genre, it is segregated. Let's just keep it real, okay? I mean, when books like romance books come out and they have white protagonists, they sell better. The research shows that if there's on the cover, if there is a same race white couple, it's going to sell more than seeing two black people in love, as an example, because black romance is its own separate subgenre within the umbrella of the romance genre. And a lot of times, guys, black romance authors or people of color as romance authors, for example, only a handful of them have even reached the level of a Sarah J. Maas or a J.R. Ward or something like that. There's been a couple. But there's, like I said before, there's nothing wrong seeing, a same race couple, two white people in love or two black people in love. Nothing wrong with that. But what I notice sometimes on BookTube is it's like that's the only thing that's being like talked about, is like just mainly like romances that are popular by white people. And what I would like to see, and I'll talk about that, maybe some areas of improvement that the romance booktube community I feel needs to do, is I would like to see a blend, because not only is that going to diversify our audiences, it's going to create better race relations between us, because a lot of times I've checked out lives, that some romance booktubers have done, and they're really well executed. They are amazing, but I notice it's the same, and that's my second point. The only books that are being talked about are the same popular romance books over and over and over again, where there's no variety. So like your audience is not going to get a diverse sample of romance books that are available. And that's just how I feel personally. It's the same popular books by the same authors, and I'm also responsible for this too, because some of the books that I talk about, like J.R. Ward's Black Dagger Brotherhood, that is a staple within Romance-landia. In case you guys don't know, Romance-landia is the generalized term for fans of the romance book genre. You can look it up. That's what it's actually called. Okay. So, overall, that is a concern for me, because if the same popular books are just getting like circulated and talked about, there's so much diversity, guys, in the romance genre. Okay. Not only, paranormal romance, you have fantasy, you have, I mean, there's so many tropes. You got mafia romances, those ones get talked about a lot too, which is fine. You have historical, and then guys, you can even break it down by mainstream like romance book publishers like Harlequin and stuff like that. But you know what else I feel needs to get pushed just a little bit more is independent romance authors. And it's like in the because there's the mainstream romance booktube community, and then there's like the indies, okay? And let me backtrack and let me finish off my pros here before I get to that. I'm all over the place today, guys. It's been a long day, okay? But to get back into it, I would say another pro though that I noticed though is, yes, more authors of color are being talked about, which is great, which is fantastic. But it's sometimes it's few and far between, unless it's like, someone that's really popular or someone that's really well respected. That's fine. It's happening, but it's like, it's not happening, because I'll check out like some, book reviews, and I'm like, maybe if I'm lucky, a couple of those like book reviews will be done by a person of color. And what I would like to see too, I would like to see too more non-people of color doing book reviews on, let's say interracial romance, which I started to notice that is starting to kind of emerge, but it's still like not as popular as I really thought it would be, because I figure we live in a diverse society, so wouldn't we want to read romance books that like reflect that? I'm just saying, so those are my pros though. I'm glad that I'm seeing more diverse booktubers talking to each other, and it's not only the popular booktubers talking to in this case, the popular romance booktubers only talking to the popular romance booktubers. I am glad that now finally these popular romance booktubers are acknowledging the ones that are coming up, or those of us who are new. So I like that. That's a pro right there. Okay, so the pros, let's get to the cons of how I feel about the current state of the romance booktube community. And I kind of sprinkled it, throughout here. So number one for me, like I said, it's good that we have a lot of booktubers talking about like interracial romance and like authors of color. I'm so happy that that is happening, because that's helping to have better race relations. However, it's the same authors over and over. So that tells me that a lot of the romance booktubers, some of y'all have to do some more research to really expand, so that it helps your audience to also expand. And yes, the audience does help with like recommendations and things like that. But if you're circulating the same type of authors, then other authors that are, let's say, independent, or for example, you know what a really great resource I feel for romances, like romance books is excuse me, is Kindle Unlimited. Kindle Unlimited, guys, is a subscription-based service through Amazon. That's where a lot of times I find really interesting books from authors that I would never have even divulged in, and then the other thing too, guys, is just you can go on Goodreads. There's so many different sources, so there's nothing wrong, talking about like guys, I love Beverly Jenkins, for example. She is incredible. Like, she is a boss, okay? Like, I love her books. So I understand why everybody's talking about them for good reason. But it just seems like, when it comes to like interracial romance, I don't see a lot of romance booktubers talking about it. And like I said before, there's nothing wrong talking about same race romances. Half of the books that I own have same race romances of all different, types of ethnicities. Most of my romance books do feature white people, that's fine, you know, and I'm not saying there's any problem with that. But the interracial romance genre, it doesn't really get talked about in the romance booktube community. And I'm really disappointed with that because there's so many authors that are really talented and they write really good interracial romance, you know. And yes, everybody has their preferences. Whatever you're into, you're going to be into it. But I feel, this is just me, I even, you know, mentioned this on my social media a while back. You guys can check me out, Bookshade #1 on Twitter, and also check out Bookshade on Instagram as well. One thing that I talked about is that I've decided, guys, that since, you know, not a lot of people are reviewing interracial romance, the only time you really hear about interracial romance is like when, like, okay, guys, trust me, February, okay, next month, right? That's probably going to be one of the main times you're going to hear about interracial romance. Or if you're into, let's say, Black romance books, you only hear about it during Black History Month. And I think when it comes to the romance genre, it shouldn't have to take a cultural observance to like talk about it, you know. Like for me, if I read an African American romance book, I'm going to talk about it even outside of Black History Month, because if you're showing all the different types of love that's out there, it's really showing your audience too that, you know, it's helping them to diversify their taste, you know what I mean? So that's one thing that is a con for me in regards to romance booktube at all. And that kind of ties in with my second point. Like I mentioned earlier, it's all the popular romance book authors that get talked about. There is an independent scene, and I'm glad that there are romance booktubers that are finally talking about, you know, independent authors, because a lot of times, guys, like there are independent authors that you won't hear about them because they're not, you know, on a mainstream book like publisher, you know. So I think that's another area that romance booktube has to work on, is there are indie authors that are incredible and wonderful, you know, and they don't ever get the time of day because they're not mainstream romance, you know, book, you know, or the book is not popular. Because that's the problematic thing with booktube in general. It's all about what's popular. And I get it, you know, if it's popular, it's going to be popular whether it's good or bad. Because a lot of the book series that people be talking about, not my tea, not my cup of tea, and a lot of them not even that great, okay? Trust me, guys, I will be doing a live episode talking about some of the worst romance books that I have ever read that have been recommended by the booktube community or romance booktube. We will discuss. But, you know, everybody has different tastes. So one thing I would say, guys, and this is more on the fans of the romance genre, if you're checking out romance booktubers, like, take their recommendations with a grain of salt, because if it's popular, okay, and the reason why I say this is if it's popular, that doesn't always equate that it's gonna be good for you to read it. So always do your research, guys, because here's the other thing. Books are getting more and more expensive. Like, guys, for me to get, like, what was it, the Witcher box set? I almost paid like $40 for it. It's super, like, books are getting super expensive. And not everybody has the privilege to buy books like on a regular basis, or to be able to get books to like review and stuff like that. So, you know, a lot of times people really respect our opinion because they use that to maybe purchase the one book that they can get a year or a month or whatever. So, you know, one thing that I'm going to be more cognizant of is when I do like book reviews and things like that, I'm really going to do more deeper analytical analysis of the books to really make sure that it's, you know, it's, because you're taking your time, guys, to watch this program, and I want to make sure that it's worth, it's worth your while. So I'm like, one thing I'm going to do is kind of have a better blend of, if I read romance books that are popular, but I'll also feature, independent authors as well, because there's so many of them out here that write stuff that is just as spectacular, and to be honest, sometimes even better than the mainstream books that be getting pushed in the romance booktube community sometimes, and this is just from like, and how I kind of came to these conclusions, guys, is just from me, watching different romance booktubers, doing research on the romance book genre, and just like, that's one area I feel romance booktube is really struggling in, is that indie versus mainstream, and just the repetition of the same authors over and over. Don't get me wrong, I fuck with Lisa Kleypas, I love me some Tessa Dare, but there are other authors as well, even in the historical romance genre, that do a fantastic job. And then speaking of that, let's talk about that for a second. Where is the diversity in the discussion of historical romance? I barely hear about it. So that's the other reason, guys, why I decided to, do more interracial romance book reviews, because so many in the romance booktube community, like you guys as the watchers, really want more discussion about it. And then it's like you get maybe a handful of recommendations. So I'm going to take the initiative to do that. So, and other thing too that I've noticed too that has been a con is the genres or the subgenres that get talked about in the romance booktube community. Okay, the main ones that I hear, and I get it because I read historical as well. I'm into Gothic literature and Victorian literature, so you're gonna get a lot of historical context up in there. So that's absolutely fine. But it's like, yeah, it's always like talking about historical romance or just contemporary romance, but there's not really a lot of discussion about some of the other tropes that are out there. It's mainly the enemies to lovers, and all the time there is this argument, I don't get it, in regards to the romance book community, of like, every romance has to have a happy ending. I'm sorry, but I disagree with that. And you know why? It depends on the context of how the author is presenting the story. That is just my opinion on it. Sometimes, guys, romance doesn't have a happy ending. This is the reason why that subgenre that's called the second chance started to kind of pick up, was because if you really, to me, if you really want to have a realistic romance book, you need to show tension between the characters. And let's say they do break up, and then maybe there's a second chance at love or whatever. And hey, I enjoy a good, they call it HEA, happily ever after. I enjoy, that ever so often. But sometimes the context of the story doesn't match up to be a happy ending, So romance does not always have to be like the genre, the book genre of romance does not always have to be a happy ending. Because when you really think about love, guys, love doesn't always go your way sometimes, okay? There's things like divorce, there's lifestyle changes. These are all different factors that come into romance. So to me, the authors that really, really write good romance are the ones that understand this concept, and that's why their stories are so, even if it goes into a happy ending, there's still some dialectical tension that builds up within the romance that makes it really, to me, more realistic. Like happily ever after is such a it's a very easy trope now, in my opinion. And yes, there are authors who specialize in that. Absolutely fine, I don't have an issue with it, but I just noticed sometimes in romance, booktube, that sometimes I see that oh, it has to be a happy. It does not always have to be happily ever after. I would rather have a realistic romance than a slapsticky, happily ever after. Okay, it's like, okay, like a couple years ago, right? everybody had an issue with the Vampire Academy movie because everybody had their hopes up and stuff, because, and this is a different analogy, but everybody had their hopes up. And that's the thing about Happily Ever After is, you know, if you are constantly reading books like that, then when you finally start to, let's say you're like, okay, I want to advance and read some other subgenres, this is where some people have issues with, like, for example, dark romance. Why are we tiptoeing over dark romance in Romance Booktube sometimes? It gets talked about, you know, but sometimes it gets tiptoed around. And see, that's the reason why the Romance Booktube community, in my opinion, cannot only focus on HEA. Because once you start to, you know, this is more in the context if you're a beginner, you know. If you're more advanced in reading the romance genre, you know this already. So this conversation is not for you now. But, you know, this is mainly for new romance readers. Like, when you just read Happily Ever After, that's fine. But then when you start to branch out and you see stuff like dark romance, or you start to see the fairy tale, you know, and the different subgenres of that, this, like, dark romance, the whole point of that genre is to contort ideas of what romance is supposed to be. So when you only read HEA and then you jump from that and you read dark romance, you can't be complaining. Because a lot of times, I noticed that on Romance Booktube here, that the people who review dark romance, they get a lot of pushback. And they shouldn't, because the whole point of dark romance, okay, it's meant to be dark. It's meant to twist the ideologies of that perfect kind of romance, you know. So that's what I would like to see more of, because I do see, you know, the dark romance being talked about, historical, contemporary, a little bit of interracial sometimes, you know. And I understand why sometimes, you know, Romance Booktube be tiptoeing over interracial romance, because maybe it's the cultural differences, I don't know. But it is a very interesting like, it was an interesting thought to me, because, like, most of the romance books that I see on Romance Booktube, they're either like contemporary or HEA kind of stuff, you know. Now recently, guys, I did start to learn more about what they call the like, I talked about this in the past, like learning more about the new adult category. I like new adult because it's that kind of happy medium, you know. And I like most. Okay, so for those of you who are not familiar, new adult focuses more on like college aged characters and stuff like that. And I love that. I love the realistic situations and stuff like that. So I just feel like Romance Booktube, we need to have like a lather of not only different subgenres, but like different experiences. Because, and I'm guilty of this too. It's very easy to want to review like billionaire romances and stuff. But in the real world, guys, and I understand romance, the whole thing about romance, it's the fantasy. But guys, we're in an interesting time in our society. With COVID-19, you know, this situation, a lot of people want more realistic romances. Like romances that they feel they can relate to the characters. And sometimes on Romance Booktube, the recommendations are like the billionaire romances or the mafia romances, which is fine, you know, but it's just, it feels very like generic type romances. So I would like to see more Romance Booktubers give more realistic romances, which like romance book recommendations, which I'm seeing here and there. But overall, I have to say though, I do enjoy Romance Booktube. I do. But I think there are, like many of the things that I've talked about today, I do think there's a lot of areas that they really need to improve on. Like, you know, only talking about the popular books really pushes out the indie authors who are just doing the same type of quality, and sometimes, like I said, even better. Okay, so to summarize here, I think there needs to be more, more variety of that. I think there needs to be more discussion on getting into romance booktube, because I won't lie, romance booktube is very, very cliquey. And it's like, oh, these romance booktubers hang out, and associate, and so it's kind of hard to feel like you belong. I feel the sectors of booktube that I feel more included, to be honest, I would say would be like the more horror side, and I would say like horror booktubers, and like more of, because I'm more like gothic alternative booktubers, I tend to get along with better. And I think that's another point. I think romance booktube needs to do a better job with unifying the community as a whole, because there are so many other sectors of booktube where you see the unity there. Like history booktube, man, they're really unified, and yeah, the readathons help and stuff like that. But like overall, I just feel like romance booktube is super cliquey, and it's kind of hard for me to like feel like, I feel like I'm a part of it just because I read the genre, but I really don't know anybody in this romance booktube community because of me. I don't know if it's the clickiness or just because I don't read popular stuff. And that's another point too. I don't know why when it comes to booktube, but I feel like the adults get left out as well, especially older adults, because I feel that our perspectives are just as valid as, as anybody else. So that's another thing I would like to see on romance booktube as well, and just booktube in general, is seeing more older booktubers and hearing their opinions on the genre, that in a diverse way. I would like to see the white booktubers and booktubers of color, and specifically in the romance booktube community, have better race relations, because that I think that would help the community not only as a whole, but it would also help the I don't like calling you watch, I like saying watchers instead of like followers. That kind of just sounds stupid to me, but that's just me. The community surrounding us as romance booktubers, I think it would help us to get along a little bit better. And yeah, I think just hearing from older booktubers about the romance genre, it's refreshing as well, because we all have different, views of how we see the romance genre overall. But I love the community, I really do. But that's just something I needed to detox on, okay, and move on, because it's something that I've wanted to talk about for a really long time, but I just didn't have the time because of being sick and stuff. But yeah, those are the things, guys, I think romance booktube, and then also booktube in general, needs to work on. I mean, we're a community. Like, we shouldn't be arguing over stuff that is so basic, because then the newer people who want to come in the community, they kind of feel like, okay, well, this is too much, so they're not going to be interested in joining it. I mean, if we're gonna have arguments on, in romance, booktube, we can still be respectful, and you can give an opinion and agree or disagree, or agree to disagree, or whatever. That's, to me. And then also, this is booktube, it's books, so it's not that serious. I know my video today, it sounds very serious, but it's not that serious. It's books, and that's why we're all here, because we want to advocate and promote people reading. And guys, let me tell you, reading helped me to deal, like, I got teased and bullied a lot, so reading helped me. It was a form of escapism. It helped me to certain aspects about myself that I felt were ugly or whatever. When I would read and I would see this character overcome those similar or even different obstacles, it made me feel better about myself. So that's why I feel race relations within, whether it's the generalized booktube community or romance booktube specifically, race relations are really important in this community, because when we're getting along, our followers, you know, or supporters will see that, and they will also want to unify, you know, as well. And when we're advocating, you know, whether it's two white people falling in love or two black people falling in love, or a gay couple or LGBTQIA plus, whatever, you know, that's helping to bring us all together. And we all have different opinions, and that is absolutely fine. But those are some of the things I just wanted to articulate, guys. Like, and once again, as a disclaimer, I'm not saying all white booktubers are bad. I am not saying, you know, you cannot, you know, review a romance book with a white couple or a black couple or whatever. You're gonna do whatever you feel is right at the end of the day. But I just feel like, you know, when those same kind of books are being promoted and there's not like book diversity, as I call it, it hinders the community. It really does. You know, people are going to, like I said, at the end of the day, people are going to pick and choose what they like to read, or, you know, what they're into. But I just want to see better unification, you know, because I enjoy the white booktubers and the book selections. Like, a lot of the books, guys, that I have in my collection have been from checking out my favorite white booktubers or my favorite multicultural booktubers as well. But when we're kind of seen as it, like, and I noticed that sometimes, like, it's like separate, you know, where it's kind of like, oh, well, this book has black people, so I'm not gonna review it because it's not my place. I think we also have to change that thinking sometimes. It depends on the book, I get it, but, you know, sometimes, like, when we say stuff like that's what causes us to divide and not come together. So, you know, there are gonna be some books, yeah, you have to understand the cultural context of it, but I don't like when people say that sometimes, you know, in the booktube community, like, oh, you know, this book is not for you. But how about they have a different perspective on it, or a different viewpoint on it, you know? But that's just how I see it. You guys, I know y'all are opinionated just as much as I am. But no, you guys let me know how you feel about the romance booktube community. What are some things you think are awesome about the community? Or, like I've been articulating for the last couple of minutes here, what are some things that you think the romance booktube community needs to work on? Because there's a lot that they need to work on, I think, for it to be more unified. And, you know, you can have debates and still be respectful, you know, like I have the right to say that I don't like a book if it's not my cup of tea. Just because I say I don't like a book, that doesn't mean that I'm saying it sucks for you. No, it just did not, you know, it just didn't, how can I say, it didn't, like, it just didn't work with me, you know. I just couldn't relate to, yeah, there we go, relate to it, you know. So before I go here, guys, let me tell you what I am currently reading right now, okay? I had to put J.R. Ward's Black Dagger Brotherhood on the back burner because, honestly, I am not enjoying the series as much as I thought I would. And I love vampires, but the book series is so menopausal, y'all. Don't get me wrong, I love J.R. Ward's personality and everything, but the book is too much. It's just so much. Sometimes it gets to the point, other times it doesn't. It's just all of, I'm gonna have to let it marinate before I go back into it, okay? I do like Zadis. He is very sexy. Yes, God. But it's a little too much, and I gotta get the other new book too that just came out. I got the novellas for it and all that. But that is a massive book series. Honestly, and this is just me, I think J.R. Ward could have done the Black Dagger Brotherhood, the initial series, in like maybe 10 books, and then expanded the universe from there. But it is just, they're mammoth books, man. Jeez, like, I'm trying, y'all, but I just can't get into it. And I thought, it had vampires, so it was gonna get me all like, because I get hot and bothered for like, I just like gothic alternative looking men. That's just, that's just what does it for me, And I also have a thing for pro wrestlers, guys, because they're sexy, so. But let me show you guys what I am currently reading right now. So right now, guys, this book, and that's another thing, Romance Booktube, y'all need to start talking more about romantic thrillers and like books that have a little more action besides, that, okay? But all my messiness aside, guys, this is what I'm currently reading right now. This book, when I finish it, y'all, and I tell y'all what, this book is crazy. This is like one of the most intense books I have ever read, but it does teach you a lot of lessons. Just because you meet a man, that doesn't mean you know a man. I'm just saying. And then on top of that, it also shows, it has a very strong female protagonist. And I believe, her name is Sam. But it's just like Sam overall, I love her as a character because on one hand, she's trying to redefine her career. She's a journalist, actually, and the book, it takes place between some of it is in Australia, other half is actually in Jakarta, Indonesia. And it touches on some really interesting topics such as terrorism, such as, being a foreign correspondent and the dangers that come with that. It even, guys, gets into betrayal. And like it says here, passion, deceit, betrayal, okay? This has all the soap opera-ness you could ever have. And guys, I have really been enjoying this book. I have been literally reading this book like a plate of barbecue ribs. I have been pulling the layers, honey. And it's by Margaret Lomas. The network is great. And guys, here's the thing. This is the first like romantic thriller type of book that I have ever read. Because normally, and see what I was talking about today, it ties in. Sometimes you can get so comfortable as a romance reader and you just want to read one type of genre of book all the time that you can miss out on like decent, books like this. And normally, guys, I am not into the thriller, that kind of stuff, or books like, romance is dramatic, okay? You gotta like some drama if you into the romance genre, right? But I would have missed out on this book if I canceled, the thriller genre, which is very popular on Booktube. Romance is not as popular on Booktube as I thought, though. And to be honest, and I agree, the romance, like, of all the sub-genres within the Booktube community, romance Booktube gets kind of thrown under the rug. Unless you really feeling romance, that's the only time you really gonna care about romance Booktube. But generalist Booktube don't be talking about us, because romance unfortunately the romance genre has a stigma. And the stigma about romance is romance books are either for women only, which is not true. Romance is just really tacky and there's no value to it. Those are like the three main things you'll hear, and etc, etc. But I think that's part of our responsibility, in my opinion, as romance booktubers, is to change that narrative, to really bring respect back to the romance book genre, so that new people, checking out the genre, or maybe people who don't even like the genre, can see that it can be just as analytical, just as complex. So that's why I try to read, even subgenres within the romance genre and get out of my comfort zone, because initially I just was constantly reading paranormal romance, and then I would kind of dip into historical. And then you know me, guys, I love some AMBW romances, Asian men, black women. Okay. I'm a man. But this book, guys, is great. Like, I cannot wait till I do a analysis. And another thing too, guys, with Romance Booktube, I would like to see more lives as well, because that really helps to, you know, bring the community in, and then it gives you a chance to really talk with your audience, and then you kind of learn, you know, and then that helps to improve your show as well, and you can give recommendations, and they give you, like, guys, my TBR is, as Remy Ma and Fat Joe would say, it is all the way up, okay? But yeah, guys, if you have not read this book, what are you waiting for? You need to jump on this. Now, this is a little bit longer book. Lately, I've been reading a lot of novellas, but this one is like around 330 pages, but it goes pretty quick, you know. But I'm a juicy reader, so I like to, you know, take my time. I'm also reading, remember that book I was telling you about called Daddy? Okay, because you know me, I am totally into the daddy. Okay, totally into the daddies. I love older men, so we gonna be doing a lot of hashtag older man book appreciation up in here. But all my messiness aside, guys, I'm reading the second book in that, like, daddy series, so I'm gonna be starting that tomorrow. And they're all like short novellas, but they're super juicy, okay? But if you're not into the whole like daddy, like older man, you know, age gap kind of fantasy, it's not gonna be for you, okay? But if you are, then it's gonna be for you. But yeah, this is what I'm currently reading, and then the second book in the daddy series. So yeah, I'll let you guys know what I think about this one. But oh my gosh, this book is just, I mean, guys, the twists and turns, like when you think you know the story, it flips the titty, okay? Many titties, okay? Oh my gosh. But yeah, guys, that's it for today's episode of Book Shade. Of course, I am your host, Amira Blaze. And guys, you can keep in touch with me the following ways. I am the Instagram, the Twitter, and I'm also going to be starting a book talk, which is similar to, like, you know, Twitter, but it's TikTok, of course. So I'll be hopefully getting that set up probably this weekend, we'll see. But I update the show, guys, twice a week, Tuesdays and Thursdays. That seems to be the best way to do the show, so I'm just gonna stick to that schedule. I know I've been going back and forth, but look, a bitch was sick, okay? To those of you guys who are still subscribed and you stuck around, thank you so much. I'm sorry, guys, a bitch was sick, okay? So now that I feel a lot better, I can get back to reading. Now that I got myself kind of in the flow with my thesis, I can, you know, start, you know, working on that, and, you know, focus on that. Actually, what I'll do, guys, if you would like for me to, excuse me, I can do like vlogs of me like just working on putting my thesis together and stuff, if you're interested in that. They call them study vlogs or whatever. So it's a good way for me to make content for y'all and, you know, get my study on. But yeah, usually, guys, I study Monday through Friday. Well, actually, I study Monday through Thursday, and then Friday, Saturday, and Sunday I just close them books and give 3 days to myself, okay? But no, guys, so I'm on once again Twitter, and I am also on Instagram. Just look up Bookshade #1. And yeah, thanks so much, guys. I appreciate your love, appreciate your support. And this is not me dissing, you know, the romance, you know, booktube or anything. But, you know, as a critic, I just want to give my opinions and how I feel. and we all have the right to give our opinions on how we feel. I love the romance genre, but it's just the way sometimes romance booktube is. Sometimes I feel left out. It's like I want to get involved, but it's like, who do you talk to when no one's like really and it's kind of like the same thing with, not necessarily on Twitch, but like on YouTube, it's all about like people talk to you based on like how many subscribers you have, and to me, I feel that's kind of lame in a way, so I'm the type of person, like, if I want to get to know you, you want to get to know me, hey, we cool, like subscriber count, I don't give a shit about that, but I just wish the romance booktube community was more welcoming on that part, and just more easy to get involved in, because like the gothic side of booktube, alternative booktubers, so easy, like, everyone's super friendly, and I'm getting to know other like alternative and gothic and horror booktubers on that front. But like just the romance booktube community, I just don't know how to get involved. Maybe you guys can help me with that. But yeah, it's interesting, y'all. It is. That's just how I see it. All right, guys. Well, I'm gonna get out of here. I got work in a couple hours, so I'm gonna take off this damn makeup and I'm gonna motherfucking relax. Okay. So, guys, like I always say, remember that reading is Halloween. All right, guys, I will talk to you on the Tuesday. All right, take care, guys.